This episode of The Evolution of Horror is sponsored by Sudio. Sudio revolutionised the way people see headphones, not just as necessary tech devices, but also as fashion accessories. Sudio headphones have a sleek, modern design, but also match the sound quality of the bulkier but higher-end professional headphones at a fraction of the cost. Visit Sudio.com to pick up a pair of top-quality headphones now and use the discount code HORROR to get 15% off any purchase and free worldwide shipping. That's Sudio.com, discount code HORROR. Welcome back to The Evolution of Horror. My name is Mike, and as ever, I am your host. Now, I know I did mention last week that it was going to be the last in the series and that you wouldn't be hearing from us again for a while, but what could I say? I couldn't keep away, and we've got some extra bonus content for you, and it's kind of in keeping with the theme that we've explored over these last few months on ghosts, because I got the chance to sit down and chat to a film director who's recently finished his latest feature film called The Borley Rectory. Now, for anyone who may not have heard of The Borley Rectory, this is it's a hard one to describe, a kind of horror animated documentary drama made in the UK that stars Reece Shearsmith from The League of Gentlemen and Inside Number 9 and A Field in England, and it's been absolutely smashing it on the festival circuit for these last few months. In fact, if you listen back to the very beginning of our Ghost series when I was chatting to Kevin Lyons, he actually brought up the movie, and this was before I'd seen it, and this is what he had to say about it.
A film called Borley Rectory by Ashley Thorpe, which is fantastic.
Cannot wait.
Superb film.
Yeah.
It's old-fashioned in the nicest sense of the word, you know. And it is all about... There's literally at one point a face appears at the window.
Yeah.
At one point a hand comes round a door.
Yeah.
It's really sort of old-fashioned, slow, spooky ghost story stuff. This is subtle, and Borley Rectory got under my skin.
Yes. So there you go. You see, Kevin Lyons was particularly excited. He was a huge fan of this movie. Anyway, I finally got to see the film and see what all the fuss was about, and it is an incredible, unique, strange and creepy experience. And I was lucky enough to get the chance to sit down and chat to its director, Ashley Thorpe, about the movie, about his love of the horror genre, of folklore, of ghost stories, and a number of other things. Just so you know, the interview does have minor spoilers, but really there's not too much in this movie that you can actually spoil. It's more about the experience of watching it. So here we go. Here is my chat with the brilliant Ashley Thorpe.
Ghostly figures of headless coachmen, a nun believed to have been bricked up within the walls that appears and vanishes mysteriously, a screaming girl at the window of the blue room, and dragging footsteps in empty halls. The scene of the ghostly visitations is the rectory at Borley.
If any entity is present here tonight, will it please make itself known?
Okay, this week I'm delighted to be joined by Ashley Thorpe. Ashley, welcome.
Oh, thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much for being here. Come all the way from the Shire, from Devon.
The Shire, all the way to Mordor.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome to grim, rainy, horrible London. So first of all, just for people who don't know you, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
What do I do? Well, I'm a freelance animator, Exeter-based, and apart from sort of commercial work and illustration, I also make animated films, which were initially short films, all very much inspired by what I think of as the neglected aspects of British myth and legend. So you had things like Scarecrow was about phantom highwayman, and the Screaming Skull about these kind of bone-locked spirits, which, you know, were always in these ghost story books and in the 70s, but then disappeared from consciousness, it seemed. And I did a Dartmoor one called The Hairy Hands, which is not as daft as it sounds.
It sounds great, yeah.
But yeah, that's a Dartmoor myth.
Yeah.
And so I started off doing those, and slowly this this idea fermented to tackle Borley Rectory.
Yeah. So tell me again, just for people who may not have ever heard of the Borley Rectory itself. I mean, what is it? This is known as one of the most haunted buildings in England, isn't it?
Yeah,
Or wasn't
yeah, it had. It was Harry Price gave it that moniker. The most haunted house in England.
Yeah.
And it was a Victorian manor house that was built in the 1860s.
Yeah.
And legend had it that it was built on the site of a former monastery wherein a tragedy had taken place and a nun had been murdered. And this place was always beset by phantoms pretty much from the time that it was built. And it really kind of gained a notoriety in the 1920s when a Daily Mirror journalist called V.C. Wall got a sniff that the vicar that was living there at the time had reported sort of strange, paranormal happenings at the place.
Yes.
And V.C. Wall went in and wrote a number of highly publicised stories about it, and that was when Harry Price got brought in, who was a famous kind of paranormal investigator at the time.
Yeah.
And then the story just exploded completely. It just, it was in it's a massive thing in the papers, and overnight vigils there, and it became very famous. People would roll up on coach tours, and they'd be, these poor ecclesiastical couples would be there just trying to quietly live at the rectory, and there'd be like a little bus party at the end of the drive kind of thing.
Amazing.
And it became very notorious, and then during a séance, it was predicted that the rectory was going to burn down, and lo and behold, I think later that year in 1939 it did, and then it was demolished in 1945, and that didn't really stop the stories. It just carried on. It had this notoriety about it, and was forever then linked with the name of Harry Price, pretty much.
What is there now then? If you went to this area, it's in Essex, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah.
Borley in Essex. I mean, is there anything there now in its place?
Bungalows.
Where it was? Bungalows.
Bungalows. Yeah,
Spooky.
bungalows. And twitching curtains of people that really don't want you wandering about at night with torches. Funny enough, I was asked about this in Helsinki last week, and they were saying, "So what's there?" And they imagine that it's this cursed earth.
Yes, this old ancient space.
No one will walk there. The
Yeah.
birds don't sing, and all this kind of thing. And it's just it's
A cul-de-sac.
garden swings,
Yeah.
and old people and young families living there. The church hasn't changed at all since the time, but the rectory itself is long gone, and the local council are very suspicious of anything to do with the rectory. In fact, the making of this film was actually raised on the village council minutes,
Right.
because they're really concerned that it was going to encourage people to come snooping around in the dead of night.
Yeah.
So, there's absolutely nothing there.
It's really interesting.
You really wouldn't know.
So what is it about these kind of things, these myths, this folklore and that kind of thing that interests you? I mean, do you believe in ghosts, first of all? Do you believe in these stories?
I love the stories. I mean, I grew up in Devon, and I was always surrounded by the road that I grew up in. There were a lot of old people that lived there, and so they knew all these old stories and the Dartmoor legends and things. And whenever we used to take them out to country pubs and things, they'd have a few drinks, and then they wouldn't stop.
Brilliant.
And I was sat there as a little boy, absolutely terrified out of my wits, listening to these stories, just thinking, we're on the edge of Dartmoor. Don't tell Dartmoor ghost stories. We've got to drive home yet.
Yeah, Dartmoor is quite scary as well. I mean, it's a creepy place to drive through it at night or whatever. It's,
very much so. And that was one of the things why I made the hairy hands, is because I remember hearing that story out on one of those pub trips and sitting there in the back seat while my dad was driving us all back, and just cautiously peering over the back of his seat, imagining that any second that these disfigured hands were going to grip hold of the steering wheel and we'd be, sent careering off the road into a ditch.
Exactly, yeah.
But, I mean, the stories have always been there, and I think I was fascinated by them as a child, and then as I got older, they came to kind of represent something else. One, I kind of a link to, I suppose, childhood fascinations, but also they felt as if they had a much greater significance. They were almost, they almost seemed to form like a fabric of society, like these ancient roots underneath Britain, made by these tales. And they felt as if they were incredibly significant, and I felt it very sad that many of them, outside kind of academic study, really, were kind of being forgotten. And I always thought, well, really, you've never heard of that story. It seems so ingrained into this particular place. I only think of the story when I come here. As opposed to it's a rock. Isn't it big? I was like, no, this is where the demon huntsman's supposed to gallop on particular nights with his wished hounds and things, and it made everything seem more magical, and amazing. And I've always felt a little bit sad that things were just drifting away.
Absolutely, yeah. So the more you kind of looked into Borley and the Borley Rectory, and what were your thoughts on all these stories and all these accounts? I mean, again, do you believe in this kind of stuff?
Do I believe? I have a kind of a stone tape feeling about ghosts.
Yes.
I believe that people see things. As to whether they're communing with dead relatives, I'm not sure. Or I believe that there's a possibility they could in some way be seeing some natural phenomena that we don't yet understand. And that, I still find that absolutely fascinating. So I believe that people see ghosts. As to whether I believe that there are literally monks roaming the grounds of cathedrals and things, I'm not so sure. I think sometimes maybe people pick up on some kind of strange natural recording of the past or something. So I'm very open-minded about it. If somebody said I saw a ghost, I wouldn't say shut up.
No, you'd be so keen to. I'd be so keen to know about
I'd want to go with them and say, okay, wow, all right, wow, I wonder why.
Totally.
Why you, and why on this night, and have these things been seen here before? Were you aware of this before you came here? Like, were you kind of preempting it almost? Or so? And I approached the Borley stories in very much the same way. Actually, I purposely didn't want to come to too many conclusions.
No.
In fact, I was constantly asked all the time, so what's your angle on Borley? What's your angle?
Right.
My angle is that there is no angle. I wanted to try and express the why I'm fascinated with the story, and try to kind of almost present the house as the rectory is the main character in it, which is constantly invaded by people. As opposed to, haven't we got a lovely house? But now there's something evil in it. I very much wanted it to be, it almost felt like this thing has always been there. And it keeps getting invaded by very strange people that have all these weird agendas and strange relationships and things. And I mean, very much the Shirley Jackson thing. It had stood there for many years, and it would stand there for many more, kind of thing. And I wanted to try and make a film that evoked those kind of passages in that story, actually.
So in terms of the form of the film itself, I mean, we should say, for people who haven't seen it, it is a, I mean, how would you describe it? It's a kind of documentary, it's a drama, it's got animation. I mean, what were you sort of thinking when you sort of, the seed of this idea came about?
It's a funny one. I mean, at first I had no idea how to describe it at all. And other people had no idea either. It was really funny, actually, initially, the way that the festivals were trying to...
People always want to put it in a box, don't they? That's the thing,
And it ended up being a really big box with a really big label because they didn't know what to call it. It was just like animated supernatural documentary docudrama.
Exactly.
And I just think of it as an animated documentary, really.
Right,
but it seemed... I knew that I wanted to tell it as a kind of a documentary form, but at the same time I wanted to do something slightly different. For a start, I didn't want it to be really dry. I wanted it to be quite spooky, and just full of kind of interesting imagery that kind of reference spirit photography and movies of that period as well. I knew that there was going to be... I knew that I wanted it to be a little bit noirish in places, and I wanted the spooky stuff to have a kind of German expressionism feel about it, and
definitely had that,
and make it really, unashamedly really stylized. So
Yeah.
it didn't have to be ultra realistic.
Yeah, totally. You can definitely see that, and it does feel like a movie from its era, which
Good.
is wonderful. And it did remind me of German expressionism, even older than that, like kind of George Méliès and that kind of thing. It had a feel about it.
I love that type of cinema.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'd hate for people to think I was like, oh, that was a clever gimmick, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And it was. It seemed weirdly. I didn't sit down and think, right, how am I going to make this? What style am I going to use? It grew very organically, to be honest. It really did. And I never imagined making it in anything other than black and white.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to resemble ghost photography, which are always slightly, they're quite obscured, shadowy images of,
Yes.
very grainy images of ghosts. You never get a nice... It's never like in the movies.
No.
Where the ghost walks up and goes, cheese.
Yes.
So, I wanted it to be a little bit obscure. And in regards to how I was going to approach the material, it was only when I was actually making it that I suddenly realised that there had been an influence there all along, which was a film called Wisconsin Death Trip.
All right.
Which was a BBC Arena thing, I think. I mean, it was a book originally in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this documentary about most possibly an outbreak of ergot poisoning
Okay.
in Wisconsin back in the 1800s, I think. And but it was told in a really interesting way, that it wasn't just a voice of God narration and just some slightly half-assed recreations of certain scenes. It was told through contemporary reports, like diary entries and newspaper reports.
Mm-hmm.
And it was filmed with very beautiful black and white photography, and everything was recreated very straight and shot very beautifully. It looked like Ansel Adams.
Right.
And I remember watching that when I was a teenager and just thinking, wow, what a really interesting way of telling a story.
Yeah.
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 It really felt like they kind of got under the skin of whatever was going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact the only voices you heard were voices from the past was fascinating. And when I started making Borley, I wasn't thinking, I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing it and then realised I was kind of doing something similar. That every word that they said, ironically, bar a narration,
Yes.
would be from journals and diaries and newspaper reports and things.
Fantastic. And so tell me about how you kind of achieved that visual style then. I mean, it looks, from looking at it, like it's the majority of it is filmed in front of a green screen, is that right? Or was it kind of any of it on location?
No location stuff at all.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And again, that grew organically. One, because I knew that as a Devon-based filmmaker,
Mm-hmm.
with very little means, and time, actually, when you're freelance, you're juggling the stuff and with childcare, and
Totally, yeah.
you're doing it in the evening.
Yeah.
So I knew that if I was going to get people like Reece involved, there was no way that I was going to be able to drag the entire cast and afford to get the whole cast down to Devon.
Yeah.
To film at some local stately hall, which wouldn't have really looked like it anyway. So I thought, well, I'm not aiming to make it look really realistic anyway, so what's the point of doing any location stuff?
Mm-hmm.
I'll do it all on green screen, make it really stylized on purpose, but that'll also give me huge freedom to purpose build and create all of the backgrounds as I want them, and distort them and make them look exactly as I want, as opposed to, I suppose this corridor will do. Can we light it nicely?
Yeah.
It's a bit dark, isn't it? I'm going to build the corridor as I imagine it from scratch.
Yeah.
And also, as I was working like that, I got in contact with Eddie Brazil and Paul Adams, who are pretty much Borley historians.
Oh, right, cool.
Yeah. And I was very lucky, actually, because they were really, really nice about it and very excited. And they said, oh, well, lots of people I think have started trying to make the Borley story before, so I wish you luck with it, because it's a really dense, convoluted story, and so I think I'll be all right, as long as I don't run out of money or nerves or life.
Yes.
Yes. And they sent me loads of contemporary photographs of the rectory in really high resolution, stuff that I'd never seen before. Silly things like the inside of Harry Price's laboratory.
Oh, cool.
And in some interior shots of the house, even silly things like what it looked like if you were stood in the summer house out on the lawn looking out towards the Nuns' Walk and things like that. Because originally I was thinking, I'll just have to imagine this. But then they sent me loads of things that were, some of it from the late 1800s. And it was incredible. It's like, well, there's my background. All I have to do is kind of chop it up in Photoshop and work the animation into it, and then I can add my actors to an actual photograph from 1890 or something. It was incredible, absolutely
Amazing.
Incredible.
And how much? And that must have taken a long time to kind of build and animate every single
yes.
frame of it. I felt like I was looking in every corner. Like I suppose, like you said before, it's that thing where sometimes it's fuzzy images or the pictures deceive you, and I kind of suddenly went, was that a person I just saw stood there in the background of that shot, or was it a trick of the light and that kind of thing? There's a lot of detail. I mean, that must have been an incredible amount of work for you.
An insane amount of work.
Yeah.
An insane amount of work. It took me, let me think. I started animating it in earnest, I think, a few months after my daughter was born, which was 4 years ago.
Right.
So I pretty much worked on it every evening and weekend for at least 3.5 years.
Wow.
So
What does your family think of that?
They love it.
Yeah.
No, I think they're amazed they got to the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
My daughter, Lily, often referred to it as Daddy's stupid film. Because it was just that thing of, you get so into making it that as soon as you think that she's occupied doing something else, I'd switch it on and then she's just looking at the back of my head.
Yeah, yeah.
Stop doing your stupid film. So it was made in the dead of night. It really was. It was a film animated at night time next to a baby monitor. And very much in between, day work and childcare and that kind of thing.
Wow.
So, but the good thing about that, I'm trying to find a good thing about that, is that you get completely and utterly absorbed in it. You're not sat there in an office and working under in a usual environment. You're working at the end of the day, and you are a bit kind of tired, but you're also wired in some ways to get on with it. Yeah. And I find myself getting hopelessly lost in just building these shots and adding these details and there's a funny thing because there are hidden ghosts and things and reflections of people watching the characters. Yeah. But there's also lots of silly things as well, like in Wall's room where he's typing the story up. And I even found photographs of magazines and newspapers from that year, and I'd add them in the background on the table, and stupid things like that. Because you'd think, I wonder if people will see that at the cinema. Is it going to be really embarrassing if you can just see, I don't know, something completely not of the period? So I put loads of things in there and tried to make sure that the wallpaper was vaguely accurate. And
it's amazing though. It's incredible. It's incredible that you were able to just take your time and get it to exactly.
I think I drove people mad, kind of taking my time. I think there are a lot of people were saying, "Oh, he's never going to finish it." There was even a funny thing that Rhys said, where he was interviewed on something. I can't think what it was, and he was saying, he loved the look of it, and he said, "Oh, it's going to take him forever."
Yeah.
Because of the way he's working.
Absolutely. So tell me a bit about the casting and the casting of Reece. How did that happen? I mean, that's fantastic, isn't it, to see Reece Shearsmith pop up?
Yeah, it was incredible actually, because it was during the first campaign. Because originally during the first campaign, I hardly had any actors involved at all. I was just slowly getting people together. And it was really looking like it was going to be another friends and family production. Sure. It's like, so Dad, do you want to shave your head and be Harry Price? Yeah. Because I don't want to do it. Yeah. It was looking like a cheap and cheerful type of thing. But I did the poster and I was putting these videos out and, trying to raise the money. And somehow the Borley poster got onto Reece's Twitter feed. And it really surprised me because he commented on it and he retweeted it, which meant that interest in the campaign went through the roof. And he said, "This looks great. I'm looking forward to seeing this." So I messaged him saying, "Thank you. I really appreciate that," because instantly, the donations have spiked. You suddenly go from reaching about 1,000 people a night to reaching 100,000 people a night or something crazy. It was nuts. And he said, "Yeah, well, actually, I've always been mad about the Borley Rectory story. he discovered it in exactly the same way that I did through the Usborne Book of Ghosts in the 70s. We had exactly the same book.
Yeah.
And except Rhys went even further, that there's a cross-section of the rectory on a double spread in the book. And as a boy, Rhys went so far as to actually build a replica out of cardboard.
Amazing. Amazing.
So I just thought, well, it's now or never. And I just thought, well, would you like to be in it? If you're genuinely that interested in it, would you like to be in it? Never ever thinking that he would say yes. And he said, yeah, sounds great.
Wow.
And that was it.
What an amazing...
Yeah, and he was very enthusiastic and generous about it. And I never... It wasn't like I was kind of hounding him for him to be in it.
No.
I really genuinely didn't think that he'd say yes. But I thought if I can work with, like-minded people that were all excited about the story, then hopefully he'd be able to see what it was I was trying to achieve, because it does look like an oddball project.
Yeah.
So I thought if he can understand what I'm doing, then it must be worth doing.
Yeah, totally. And there's nobody more perfect really in terms of not just his acting ability, but also that is what we associate him and Mark Gatiss and those types of people.
Yeah, and it's sincere. That's the lovely thing.
They love it, don't they? They absolutely love that genre. That's perfect. Yeah. What about Jonathan Rigby as well?
Similar thing actually, because as soon as, and I actually remember slowly turning around from my desk and telling my wife that Reece Shearsmith had just said he'd like to be in my film. And it was like, run up the shop, buy some wine.
Oh my God. Yeah.
We need to celebrate. And I remember, like you get that kind of, I can't believe it. So you chuck the League of Gentlemen on, you're watching Psychoville.
Yeah.
You're doing everything. And I was watching a documentary it was about the Christmas special that League of Gentlemen did. And it was about how influenced by the Amicus films.
Yeah.
Which is a really obvious kind of influence when you see their stuff. And I was sat there, working on the film. And I heard this voice suddenly start talking, and what more perfect place could we be than Highgate Cemetery? And I thought, who's that? And I looked up, and Jonathan Rigby stepped out into shot at Highgate Cemetery talking about the League. And I just looked up and thought, I wonder if he'd play Harry Price.
Yeah.
And again, I reached out and just said, Rhys has just said he'd like to be involved in this project, and I sent him all the information. I said, would you be interested in playing Harry Price? And he said, sounds delightful, and that was it.
That's how wonderful.
Yeah, it was incredible, because the hardest thing about the project was raising the money to do it and trying to survive whilst doing it. In terms of actually making it and casting it, it was really easy.
And then, those two they're in a significant section of the movie, but it is just a section of the movie.
Yeah.
Were you ever tempted? I mean, you get Reece Shearsmith. Can I make him somehow the star of it? Do you know what I mean?
It turns into a Ghostbuster with a proton pack.
Exactly. Was there ever a temptation to increase his role? I suppose.
I increased everybody's role because originally I was thinking that this thing was going to be a long-form short film.
Yeah, okay.
I really thought when I first started raising the money, and I raised enough money to make a short film, not to make a feature.
Yeah.
But as soon as people like that came on board, the first thing I did was, if they're going to take a day or two out of their schedule, I can't have them turn up, walk around a bit in front of a green screen, frown, and walk off stage left. It's like I've got to give them something interesting to do. So I did make it more ambitious, and I gave them a lot more lines because I knew that they could do it. And I wrote more scenes of them together, and I did that with all the cast actually. All of them, every single person, I gave them more to do. And it didn't really, it's stupid really, it didn't really occur to me that by making everybody's part bigger, you're going to be making the film longer.
Yeah, and then it's a feature.
And it was only when I didn't realise until I started editing it together that I'd actually inadvertently made a feature film. Amazing. And I kept it secret, even from the Indiegogo backers. I didn't tell them until it was finished, and then said, well,
By the way,
thank you for your £20 pledge. You've now got a feature film to watch instead.
It's amazing. So the film, crucially, is scary in places. I mean,
I hope so.
It's
It's
got that proper kind of eerie uncanniness to it. How important was that to you? I mean, are you a horror movie fan first of all? And how much would you consider this a horror movie?
I would. Yeah. I mean, I'm complete and utterly a horror fan.
Mm-hmm.
One of my greatest thrills was getting to write for Fangoria magazine.
Oh, amazing.
Back in the day, and I was amazed because as a teenager, I used to smuggle it into school in my English folder. So
yeah.
I've always been a horror fan, absolutely crazy about them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I did approach Borley as a genre piece, even though I knew it was going to be a documentary. I wanted it to stand as a genre piece, and have an atmosphere like The Old Dark House or Dead of Night or something like that.
Yes.
And to be steeped in that kind of those kind of genre tropes as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You know, it was funny because we only got round to cutting a proper trailer for the film in February,
mm-hmm.
and and there's a moment in the trailer that made my producer Tom and myself fall about laughing, like almost fall off our chairs, because there's a moment that comes up and it says, it's a quote actually from, I think it's from Celluloid Screams, that said, "Unlike any horror film you've seen," which is a lovely thing for them to say.
Yeah.
But that quote came up over a low-angle shot of the rectory with a sudden flash of lightning. And it's like, that's the most obvious shot
like
of a horror film you've ever seen. You know, I thought,
Yes.
no, let's keep it. It's funny.
It's great,
We'll keep that.
and it is unashamedly old-fashioned, isn't it? That's the
Unashamedly
thing.
so, yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. I mean, I even went so far as to make sure that I don't think there's any camera movement in the whole film.
Right. Yeah.
Everything's completely locked off.
Yeah.
And that was partially because it's easier to animate that way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it hasn't stopped me in other productions. I really wanted it to be very, very straight and also very slow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's I purposely kept trying to make myself slow it down and slow it down and slow it down. I'm sure much to people's annoyment.
Well, yeah, and there's like a couple of moments of proper kind of old-fashioned British humour to it as well.
Yeah.
It feels like, and again, actually, I watched at the BFI a couple of days ago The Old Dark House, and it had that kind of tonal thing to it where it is creepy. It's also quite funny. It's also got that kind of quaintness.
Yeah, hopefully a little bit charming.
Yes,
you know,
charming.
It can be chilling, but also a little bit charming as well. And the characters occasionally are slightly silly, and cartoonish.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favourite bits in the whole film, I have to say, is the bit where without giving away any spoilers, the bit where the ghost manifests at the end of the little girl's bed.
I was just about to bring this up. This was my favourite moment.
Yeah, and I remember animating that. I remember actually filming it and then animating it, and then thinking, you really want to cut, so don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hold this as long as you possibly can.
Yeah,
because there is always that temptation to make it quick and to go
something up
and to go for the kind of the insidious scares, the jump scares. And I thought, I want this to really feel like it felt as a child when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're looking at the end of your bed and you don't remember hanging a coat on the end of your bed.
Yes.
So what is that? Is that something stood there?
Yes.
And it takes a while to kind of knit the form of the thing together from the shadows and the light and work out.
It does.
It's a coat. Thank God for that.
Yeah. Hi there. I just wanted to quickly interrupt the me from the past, as this is me from the present. Anyway, I'm here to just tell you a little bit about this week's sponsor, which is Sudio. Now, when listening to, top quality podcasts such as this one, it's important to listen on decent headphones so you don't miss all of those little subtle nuances and sound edits like this one. And I know, as an avid podcast listener as well as editor, just how important it is to get good headphones when listening to audio content. Currently, it seems like the headphone market can offer you one of two things. Either you can get the kind of sleek, stylish ones that may not have actually brilliant sound quality, or you can get the more high-end, top-quality headphones, but they tend to not look as good. They might be bulky studio-style headphones that aren't always going to be the most comfortable and easy to carry around with you. Sudio, on the other hand, are revolutionising the way headphones work. They're not just tech devices, they're also fashion accessories. While emphasising their modern Scandinavian design, they also provide a product that matches the quality of even the highest rated headphones on the market, but for a fraction of the cost. I'm actually wearing my pair of Sudio Bluetooth headphones right now, and they are great. They're also noise cancelling, which is really nice, so I can't hear anything else going on around me. Although sometimes that does tend to creep me out when I am editing alone in the dark at night. But even so, I can't recommend them enough. The quality is pristine, and they're also very light and sleek, so you can fold them up, put them away, and carry them around with you. So Sudio are offering listeners of this podcast a chance to get 15% off any purchase, any pair of headphones that they have to offer. You can just visit sudio.com, that's sudio.com, and enter the word horror as a promo code, and that will give you 15% off any pair. And you'll also get free worldwide shipping wherever you are in the world. That's sudio.com, promo code horror. Now, back to the me of the past.
It's interesting, isn't it, that people yearn for the quiet, uncanny scares.
Absolutely.
And yet the industry is almost predominantly ruled by productions that are full of the opposite. Yeah. It's strange, isn't it? Because
it's funny.
You get things like, I remember watching The Conjuring 2, and there were bits in The Conjuring 2 which I thought were really frightening. Yeah. And they were very subtle things. It was when, the little girl goes to walk down the stairs and she looks into the living room, and it takes a little while before you realise the old man sat in his armchair.
Yes.
That's a terrifying shot.
Yes.
But all the other stuff there, the bang, 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 cut.
2.5 hours of it. That
that I don't find that frightening.
No.
It's a very different kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because we had I had Kevin Lyons on this, and he was the one that he brought up your film actually and said
I did sit and listen to that.
Yeah, he loved the film, and he said it's unashamedly old-fashioned, and again it's that thing of these days, these modern ghost movies, they are much more bang, 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 loud, overwrought, that kind of thing. And then you get the odd little gem here and there, and you get these kind of, especially the kind of more Spanish movies, The Orphanage, these types of international movies that tap into something a little bit more old-fashioned in a way.
Yeah, very much so. It's a shame that there aren't more of them, but I suppose, I find it increasingly difficult to judge. I find it hard to judge, and as I'm getting older, and I'm wondering whether it is because it reminds me of a certain type of production that was very popular in the 70s when this stuff really came to my attention. Mm-hmm. Is it based on nostalgia, partially?
Were you a big fan of the M.R. James BBC ghost stories?
Yeah, very much so.
Because they have that feel as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And even down to things like Tales of the Unexpected, an armchair thriller. Yeah. All the Nigel Neal things like Beasts, all those kind of shows that were Sapphire and Steel, I loved, and The Prisoner, these sorts of shows that I sat and were absolutely hypnotised by as a 6-year-old, sat watching Sapphire and Steel. Yeah. And I rewatched them again recently, and I was watching it thinking, I'm amazed that I sat through this. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're still great, but they're so confidently slow.
Yes, absolutely.
So slow. And I think this would never get made now.
It absolutely wouldn't. Again, we've talked quite a lot about M.R. James and that kind of thing on this, and Whistle and I'll Come to You.
Yeah, wonderful stuff.
First 95% of it is just an old man but eating breakfast and not really doing much, and then it's
waffling to himself.
So slow, but it needs that pacing to then scare the shit out of you in that last 2 minutes sort of thing, But yeah, you're right.
No.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we like you say, we'd never get something like that now, which is. And so was there ever a part of you that wanted to make it more of a crowd pleaser, to add in some jump scares or anything like that?
Yeah, genuinely. I mean, there are a couple of parts where I think there are little jump scares, where there's the shadowy hand grabbing her from behind. So there's occasional sort of shrieky moments. Yeah. But no, I purposely resisted it. Yeah. And it felt out of place. It felt really out of place to suddenly have a Ghostbusters moment where something would just go towards the camera. That would have felt crazy.
Yeah.
I just wanted it to feel like it was from another age where you didn't really get that so much.
Yeah.
And even the big scares were slow scares of, a hand creeping out from the bookcase towards someone. It was always very slow and the suspense thing as opposed to bang, jump scare.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. Do you have a favourite haunted house movie, a favourite ghost movie?
Yeah, that's quite a tricky one. In terms of conventional one, I think probably The Haunting.
Yes.
I mean, I love the original.
Yes. Yeah. Of course. I mean, that's the only one. That's the only one.
There's only one. We won't talk about the other one.
No. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love that one.
Yeah. And again, like you say, it's that feeling of this house has always been here. People will come and
exactly,
go.
And whatever walks there walks alone.
Yeah.
Which I think I even nicked that line.
Yeah.
It's yeah, and that was quite a big influence on the film as well.
Yeah.
Very much so. And and that story was so obviously inspired by the Borley Rectory and its investigation. But I mean, I also think of my favourite all-time film actually is Alien. And I tend to think of Alien as a haunted house.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, especially the whole opening, say, half an hour until it all really kind of kicks off on the ship.
Then it kind of almost becomes like a slasher as well.
Yeah, very much so. They're being stalked by something.
Yes.
But that, all that wonderful stuff when they find the derelict ship.
Oh yeah.
And you don't know anything about it.
Yes.
And I refuse to know anything about it.
That's being explained in terrible prequels. But anyway.
Yeah, I can't know. That's not it. No,
thank
not
you.
having any of that.
No, thank you.
It's that was the most amazing thing about it. It was the fact that they didn't know anything about it. And it felt like some sort of... It felt like when Kane went into that thing, it felt like some kind of evolutionary trespass. Like he was at a juncture in history where he was seeing things he really shouldn't have seen.
Exactly.
And that's what was so wonderful about it. It was everything felt so alien.
Yes.
And that was what's so frightening about it.
Yes.
And that dread. I still remember the dread I felt when I first saw it back in, what was it? It was the first time it was screened on ITV. So was that 1982?
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
So I was 10.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I was absolutely devastated by that film.
What was the first? Do you remember what the first scary movie was you saw? Was it that, or what was your
the
first
first one.
experience of proper horror?
Well, that was the first one that really frightened me.
Yeah.
And but I actually suffered from night terrors when I was a kid. So I actually had to be very careful about what I did watch because it wouldn't take much. I could the opening titles of Armchair Thriller, the little animated shadow sitting down.
Funnily enough, Andy Neumann, who's been on the podcast, said exactly that he was traumatised by that opening.
My hands would start to shake. And even if I heard the... I'd have to leave the room sometimes. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of... Even though I loved monsters and UFOs and creatures, because of the night terrors... And because they were so easily conjured, I used to have to be very careful. And it was weirdly, it was kind of after Alien.
I can't believe you watched Alien when you were 10, given all that.
That's my mum's fault. That was. And the thing is, it's not like she didn't know what was in it. She went and saw it at the cinema, so she knew exactly what was going on. And she sold it to me like it was like Star Wars, but a bit scarier. Oh yeah, like Star Wars, but a bit scarier. That's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
Like. Jaws is a little bit like Free Willy.
Yeah, exactly. Just a
bit scarier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, and then after that, I think that between 10 and 15, I started to develop a real interest in kind of monsters and monster makeup, and the more that I read about it, the more I got into things like Fangoria magazine from these dog-eared copies from the local newsagent. Yeah. The night terrors gradually went away. It was almost like I'd kind of beaten them by almost like embracing whatever it was that was, triggering them or whatever.
Yeah.
Because then I just started thinking about horror films and I started thinking about their construction, I guess.
Yeah.
And how they
makes
put together.
It safe, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, they never really lost their appeal or their charm.
No.
they lost a great deal of their power, I think.
Yeah.
They still, there's still some that still scare me, but I don't know. Compared to how the night terrors used to feel, scary movies feel like a trip to the fair, I think.
Absolutely, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, totally. And it's funny, again, I've had a lot of people talk about that. I think I had Rosie Fletcher talking about how much Ringu scared her, and she had to kind of, to deal with it, she kind of had to read up as much about it as possible, about the making of it. She was like, it was my way of making it safe, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's really interesting, yeah, because otherwise it was too much. It was too
much.
weird, uncanny, gets you when you sleep kind of stuff.
It would be like the end of Poltergeist. You can just imagine her pushing a telly out into the
into
the garden.
Yeah.
You can stay out there.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it, with horror, that we sort of seek that out. We want to give ourselves that experience in a way.
Yeah.
Why is that? Do you think? What's the appeal with horror?
Yeah, I mean that's a tricky one, isn't it? I think it's there's lots of kind of academic thought about what it is and whether it's rehearsing death and all this kind of stuff, and I think people just really like to be scared, don't they? They do. I think it's as simple as, it's the old roller coaster analogy.
It is, yeah.
Like, what is the thinking behind getting on a roller coaster? I don't want to do that.
No.
That's mental.
No,
and yet they're fun.
Yeah. It's like, why do you bungee jump? Why do you jump out of planes? Why do you, it's that weird.
But then in some ways, even a bungee jump, I wouldn't do that because it's really dangerous.
Yeah, totally.
And jump out of a plane, I might actually die.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to get killed watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I think that it's just that buzz, isn't it? It's like an endorphin thing. It's a rush.
Yeah.
That people like it, but at the same time, it is safe. You do get to the end of it and go, oh, I'm going to have nightmares from that. But I know deep down that Leatherface isn't waiting for me in the kitchen. Not really.
Yes, exactly. So now it's kind of out there now, Borley Rectory. It's been playing at festivals. How has that been for you? What, after all of that work you've put in, I mean, how scary was it when you first started to show it to audiences, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was a really weird experience, actually, because I think I kept double guessing how I was feeling all the time. There was a part of me that was really worried that people were going to sit and look at it after it being so much work and go, what the hell is this? This is rubbish. So I was slightly worried, but then there was another part of me that almost felt like that the film seemed to be, I don't know, such a love letter to a particular kind of era, and almost like I still think of the film a little bit like one of those display cases that has lots of butterflies pinned in them. Yeah. That it's like all my little obsessions all pinned in a box. Yeah. And I just had a weird confidence feeling that if I feel about these things in this way, then hopefully there'll be quite a few other people that will look at it and go, oh yeah, I remember that in the Osborne Book of Ghosts, and oh yeah, I remember that, and so it was a little bit frightening, because you always have this thing, especially at dedicated screenings, not so much, because you knew for a fact that people were there to see that. Yeah. At the big horror festivals, I knew it was going to be a little bit of a Marmite film.
Yeah, totally, because again, it's not your conventional horror movie.
Not at all. And as much as there are a lot of people that go to horror festivals to be surprised, there are also a large demographic that go there because they want more of the same. Yeah. And it's the safe thing. It's like, I want the Hatchet type of films. Yeah. I want the big gore fest. Yeah. And I love Evil Dead as much as anyone else. But you could sense at some of the festivals just kind of shifting in the seats.
Right.
Like, is it really going to be black and white all the way
When's
through?
When's it going to get properly scary?
Yeah. What's going on? What is this? So it was a bit weird, and you could always tell because you'd see the audience split right in half when it got to the end of the film, and you could see the people that had been itching to get out, and the people that were not going to stay for the Q&A. Right. But then the other half of the audience would be very much there and completely fascinated, and they'd be talking about like the Osborne Book of Ghosts and Reece and all these other things. So I mean, it's actually been doing really well. I've been amazed actually for something so purposely idiosyncratic, really. Yeah. To be so widely and affectionately embraced. It's been nice.
I do think,
Thank God.
No, absolutely. And you're right. There's always going to be a certain amount of people that's not going to be for them. But also there is this other group of people, myself included, as I've gotten older and I've gotten less fussed about the big gore movies maybe, and like we were saying, there's not many movies like yours anymore, even ghost movies, and it's so nice to see something that is just like, oh, it's going to just build on that kind of creepy dread, and that's something that a certain portion of the audience I think are really after right now, it feels like, as well.
I think so, yeah.
There's a want for that.
It felt like it was the a good time for it.
It does,
strangely.
Yeah,
and
it does. And actually, even, you've got things like, it's much more mainstream, but you've got ghost stories, again, very kind of old-fashioned, British, creepy, kind of that kind of Amicus style coming back as well. It does seem to be like it's having a bit of a moment.
I think so. And as much as people have talked about like the folk horror revival and these sorts of things, I think that there does seem to be a hunger for, I think, not for everyone, obviously, but I think there does seem to be a hunger for an alternative to things.
Definitely.
Even with things like, even the way in which Twin Peaks: The Return was greeted, because I was expecting more of the same, but then another part of me was thinking, is Lynch really going to do that? Yeah. No, he's not.
Never going to give you what you want.
No, exactly. Yeah. And that was ironically what I wanted. And I was really glad that he surprised me, because I thought, if it's really going to be everybody 25 years older still smiling and talking about cherry pie,
exactly,
it's going to be ludicrous. It's going to seem like, oh, they brought back Cheers or something.
Exactly that.
And defying that expectation was wonderful.
And that was a real shock. And I think we all felt that, like there's part of you that wants to see that. You want to see the old characters back and talking about characters. And when it did start and you barely see any characters and you're not hearing all your favourite lines and you're not seeing your favourite people, what the hell is this? And then you kind of think, no, in hindsight, what a masterpiece that was. And, he managed to once again completely baffle everyone.
Yeah, absolutely confounded people. And I'd be Skyping Mick at the time about the soundtrack and things, and we'd just be talking enthusiastically about it, and both Mick and I come from like a genuine interest in things like Svankmajer and the Brothers Key, and kind of like an art house background. It was one of the things we bonded over at university when we met, actually. So we'd be sat each week watching Twin Peaks and just going, I can't believe they let him do it. I
can't believe this is telly. Yeah.
Especially that completely black and white episode with the hitchhikers, and
it's unbelievable, isn't it?
That's amazing. I can't believe that went out on a mainstream channel.
I know.
Incredible.
Yes, I don't want to go down a wormhole there, because I could talk about Twin Peaks forever. Exactly. But incredible. Yeah, absolutely amazing. So if people, listening, want to seek this film out or want to see it, I mean, what are the chances that they can see it? Are there any plans yet for a release, or will it be playing at more festivals?
It's still being snapped up by festivals.
Yeah.
At one point, we were in discussion trying to get a screening at the BFI. Oh,
right, great.
But they're very slow to get back to us.
Yeah.
It's we've had a number of different parties approach us to distribute it. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm very confident, actually, that it will probably be out by the end of the year on DVD and Blu-ray and whatnot. Preferably Blu-ray, of course.
Of course.
Just because of all the detail. It looks terrible on DVD. Good grief.
Yeah, you want people to see those newspapers in the background and things.
Where's all my ghosts gone?
Yeah.
They're just smudges now. So yeah, I think it'll be out. I think it'll be out on them to buy. And other than that, it is going to be a case of catching up with it on festivals and things. But I have a list on the Carrion Films website, and every time that another screening is confirmed,
it gets added on.
Chalk it up there, just so that as much for me to remember what's going on as telling everyone else what's going on.
Yes, you must be your head must be all over.
It does get a bit. Yeah, it gets a bit bewildering.
Craziness. Yeah. Fantastic. Finally, then, I mean, I always ask everyone this at the end. What's your favourite ever horror movie? You've mentioned it's Alien. Is it? Is that your favourite?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I love things like The Shining as well, and The Exorcist. I'm a bit of a cliche. Like all the
there's a reason
ones.
why they're the best, isn't it? What about the scariest? I mean, what's the scariest movie experience you've had, at least in your adult life?
In my adult life, that's a tricky one, actually. I think because I don't think I've really been genuinely frightened by anything.
Yeah.
That sounds so macho, doesn't it?
No, I mean, I
haven't been frightened by anything. Weirdly, the last thing that really made the hairs on the back of my neck go up, and I stopped on the stairs going up to bed and looked round, was incredibly, it was the last section of Insidious, believe it or not.
Wow,
Weirdly,
interesting. Yeah.
And the reason for that was because it was that moment when I can't remember the name of the main character in it.
Yes, it's Patrick. Is it Patrick?
Yeah,
Wilson?
Patrick Wilson. Yeah, it's the moment when he's confronted by his mother, and she's saying that when you were a child, you had night terrors, and and then she shows these photographs saying that there was always this figure getting closer to you.
Yes.
And I was sat there watching films like I always do, just with headphones on in the dark. And I suddenly looked at it and the hairs went up on the back of my neck, and I thought, do you know what? I don't think I've ever heard somebody even talk about night terrors in a film.
Yeah.
And then it started me thinking about maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was all about something getting closer to me over the years. Yeah. And weirdly, my dad suffered from them too.
Oh, horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
And so that's when I started thinking, my God, maybe it is just like Insidious.
Yeah.
That we've both have this thing, and maybe we've always been hunted by this thing in our sleep.
It's coming for you.
Yeah, and I had a proper little moment, and then it descended into, who's that bloke covered in lipstick?
Yes, yeah. Why is Darth Maul suddenly
what's he in it? What's that all about?
I know, it's a shame because it's an incredible idea actually, Insidious.
It gets really frightening. Yeah, and then it's. I don't get that.
No.
And so going up to bed, I had a little moment where I stopped on the stairs, and I was expecting, when looking over my shoulder, to see some shadowy figure stood there behind me.
It's good inspiration for a film. That you should.
Yeah, I should.
What have you got any ideas of what you might do next after Borley? Any plans to do another film?
I'm going to sleep.
Yes, sleep for a few years.
I've got lots of ideas, actually. Yeah. I've got lots of ideas for short films I'd like to do, lots of local myths and things. Nice. I did actually write a first draft of a feature film back before I started Borley, actually, based on Spring Hill Jack. And I was going to treat it very much as a gothic horror, sort of early Victorian era based, but as a real inverting of the Batman story, because Batman obviously derives from the early Penny Dreadfuls about Spring Hill Jack, and you can see it in all the illustrations. Yeah, and I thought it'd be really fun to do a story about what is essentially a Victorian superhero that goes bad. Yeah, and so it would end up a bit like Holmes versus Watson kind of thing. Brilliant. So I wrote that screenplay. And the first draft's all right, but needs a lot of work. I'd also like to do a portmanteau horror. I'd love to do that, and that would all be Dartmoor ghost stories. Because they're all good ones. Yeah, and I know exactly how it would be bookended, because there's a pub called the Warren Inn, and it's right in the middle of this long road that cuts right across Dartmoor, and there's nothing there apart from this pub. So it's there in the middle of nowhere. And it would obviously start off with somebody's car breaking down on the moor, walking to the inn, and they go inside, and then it's like stories. Exactly. It's like Dr. Terror's. Yeah. Except not a train carriage, but they'd be in a pub. Perfect. And you're off, kind of thing.
Please do it. Make it happen. It
so I'd love to do that.
Yeah, wonderful.
But there's lots of different things, and I was also talking to Stephen Volk about possibly working on something.
Oh, excellent!
So
excellent.
Yeah, so many ideas. But I mean, it's been funny because since properly finishing the film and getting it out there, just after Christmas, I've actually been mainly painting. I think just to try and get my face away from that screen.
Yeah, fair enough.
And just I need to not be doing quite so much animating, and I'm going to paint.
Yeah, and give yourself a little break.
Exactly, and kind of. Enjoy myself. I'm still painting monsters, but
of course,
at least I'm not sat there staring at a computer.
Yeah, not pixels. Yeah,
pixels. Yeah,
good, wonderful. Ashley, just thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. If people want to find you, details of where your film's screening, that kind of thing, what are the kind of good sort of websites or social media details they need to know?
Yeah, I mean, there's a Carrion Films Facebook page, which I keep updated as regularly as I can. Great. And there's also a web page as well, which is carrionfilms.co.uk. Lovely. And that has I'm rubbish at updating that. I'll admit out right now. The only thing I do regularly keep updated on there actually is the screenings, just so I have a log and I can see what's going on and when.
Brilliant.
But yeah, it's all out there, and as soon as we secure a distributor, then I will be posting very loudly on there. It's like, hey, it's coming out at last.
Amazing. Look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for listening. And a big thank you there to my guest, Ashley Thorpe. Well, if you are intrigued about seeing the Borley Rectory, I mean, you should be after that discussion, then please do have a look online, check out his website, check out his details. I've listed them all in the show notes, and that's where you can find any information about whether the film is going to be playing at any upcoming festivals, or, fingers crossed, whether it's going to be getting some sort of wide release later on in the year. So do keep an eye out. And get in touch with me and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. There's an email address, that's evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter @evolutionpod, or on Facebook, that's facebook.com/evolutionofhorror. Now, we will be back for a new series at some point in the next few weeks, and that's where we're going to be discussing all things folk horror. But don't forget, you have got an entire series on slasher movies, that's 15 episodes on slasher movies to listen to, and 20 episodes to listen to on ghost movies. They are all still available. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, you can find us on Stitcher, on Libsyn, or any other major podcast platform. In the meantime, just keep an eye out. There may be another bonus episode that pops up at some point in the next couple of weeks. So it's very important to subscribe. But for now, thank you for listening, and I will be back some point soon for all of this and more on the evolution of horror.